Hello guys, welcome back to Potence War, and today we will take a look at Wargaming and its scales, and how to categorize it from skirmishes to armies. Because Wargaming games can be divided according to many, often overlapping criteria: activation method, model size, genre, and so on. However, most games can be universally categorized by the size of the battlefield, or the number of warriors on it, and placed into several boxes that better help determine the time of the game before a potential player even open the rules. In my opinion, these, you could say, three main categories are skirmishes, regimental games, and armor games. But again, these are basically my categories, and it's my opinion. It's not, carved in stone, and maybe you will disagree with me. And if you do, please write me in the comments. So let's start with skirmishes. Skirmish, as the name suggests, deals with a small skirmishes over with a few soldiers. Depending on how many of them there are, it could either be a regular skirmish or straight man-to-man skirmish, as man-to-man is sometimes, write out as M to M, and is abbreviation of man-to-man. This sounds, really better in my head than it's now, so let's move on. In regular skirmish, several small units of few miniatures are in play. In M2M, each soldier is, basically on his own. The smaller scale of the battle then allows for game mechanics that could, not be applied for large battles, or would make the game unnecessarily complex and lengthy, and thus not so fun. So models often deals with individual weapons, reloads. Game usually have some form of enemy spotting, dealing with individual soldiers' wave points or field of use, and similar little things that can be managed with 10 to 20 models, but not with armies of hundreds of figures. Scenario wise, you could think of these small games as special forces actions, Wild West stakeout ambushes, patrol clashes, samurai sword fights, tanker clashes, European adventures in colonial Africa, and so on, so on. The advantage of skirmish is that, it's starter game. You could start with and later move on with bigger battles as your army or your model collection grows. With squad of commandos or space marine scouts, you could play skirmishes at first and seamlessly incorporate them into your larger army. That's even, case of Kill Team for Warhammer 40k, for example, which is basically released for this to, you lure you into hobby and then force you to buy more and more figures. For the number of model skirmishes should include, basically naval or air games. After all, Clash of Five Ships is actually a kind of skirmish, isn't it? But they are still referred by their focus as naval or air games, so they are called naval war games or air war games, and we don't count them in the skirmishes at all. Because basically it's automatic that you will be flying or sailing with few ships or airplanes and, not moving with hundreds of them. Although I'm sure there are several exceptions to it. So let's move on to the regimental games. And when we have enough of the small games, then even when collecting and playing, we could move on to the regimental ones. As the name suggests, you move entire units around the table, but not necessarily regiments. Individual models are already part of the large units that moves, shoots, and basically dies as all. Yes, mostly even dying. So you remove the whole unit of 20 models as one. Most of these games are no longer even with the separate removal of the models each roll, but instead you collect various paints, shock, morals, counters, and stuff like that. And after a certain number of these counters, they deteriorate and go off the table as the whole unit. These game simplifications in effect made it possible to play even relatively large battle with lots of soldiers or miniatures if you want. Instead of moving 5 soldiers with individual facing and acting to deal with, you simply move large unit of 30 soldiers at once. And there may be 10 or even more of such units on the table, and you get to the hundreds of deployed soldiers miniatures. As a result, regimental games often already contain rules for grouping a unit into large units, which have then to act together, stick together in coherence, and perhaps even have a common morale. So we will take, for example, you will take Napoleonic battalion or regiment, and group them to the brigade, and then activate the whole brigade, which will be 3 units of 30 soldiers each. So you will activate a move by 100 soldiers at once. And now let's move to the large skirmishes, because now when we know what the skirmish is and how regimental games look like, we get little detour back to these large skirmishes, which combines elements of both previous modes of play and, ideally, take best of both. This is perhaps why the large skirmish is one of the most popular, levels in wargaming. After all, it includes both Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Age of Sigmar, which is, in my opinion, not the best games on the market. But well, you can deny that they are one of the most popular ones on the market and most mainstream known. While small skirmish offers us something like 5 to 20 soldiers to play with, and regimental games ask us to field 300 or plus soldiers, large skirmish will offer us game where we have something like 50 to 100 soldiers. Enough to use mechanics like shooting soldiers separately in the squad, as well as having them die one by one. However, units already mostly move together, have common morale, common activation, and stuff like that. So now we sort of categorize it, and now it's time to give you a few examples. In Warhammer 40k, the man-to-man skirmish would be Kill Team, where the players control five Space Marine scouts, each acting independently. The regular skirmish would be the mode of Combat Patrol, which I think is now obsolete, but in previous editions, you have the classic Warhammer 40k rules, but you have limited in points, so you could deploy, something like 10 Space Marines with transports and 5 scouts. The classic Warhammer 40k would fall in the larger skirmish box, and then the regiment one would be, well, the Apocalypse mode, or the old Epic, or how it's named now with this Horus Heresy Epic version, which is released this year. Warhammer also offers Aeronautica Imperialis, where the players control squadron of fighter planes, but as I said above, even in this multi-modal game, air and naval games are never classified like skirmish or regimentals or stuff like that. They are their own, type of gaming. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Warhammer, I will show you a similar example on World War II. Man-to-man skirmish is, squad of commandos going to sabotage a German radar base. Skirmish is platoon of commandos fighting for village against another German platoon. And for large skirmish, it's something like another infantry platoon or whole company supported by tanks. And a regimental game is when you start moving platoons that are in companies instead of separate squads. Which is, for example, Crossfire, which I have reviewed on my channel, and in my opinion is one of the best World War II games, or even one of the best war games ever, so I recommend definitely you to check it out. And that's generally how you could divide games in this modern terminology according to formation that we will play it, and it doesn't really matter where the game is set up. While 13 Knights does not logically make a platoon, but it fits our, needs in the size-wise, so don't be fooled modern and terminology. If you're playing a game with 30 Knights, it's, platoon size, and if you have multiple of them, it's, a large skirmish. So, to, wrap it up, the man-to-man skirmish is squad game. Skirmish is a platoon game. Large skirmish is game from reinforced platoon to company, and regimental game is game from companies to battalions, to even brigades. And what happens when you have several brigades or even entire divisions on the table? Where to go next? Well, the answer is army games. Then, if you have several, brigades and divisions, you have no other choice but, to move up in the rules and go for the army games. In these, All these little things like, separate pieces are no longer needed. You will need to multi-base your miniatures, and slowly we don't even care much about the units themselves, but everything will move in larger formation with few hundred soldiers. As a result, most of these rules are already written for 6 or 3 to 2 millimeters, or they are even for tokens only. This allows us to game to acclimate not just the skirmishes or pieces of battles, but quite large battles with good degree of abstraction. For example, the army level game Age of Hannibal from Little Wars TV do not misunderstood it for the Age of Hannibal expansion for Saga, which Saga is basically large skirmish. Somebody would say just skirmish, but I think Saga is large skirmish. But again, back to the Age of Hannibal from Little Wars TV. It's army level game that has infantry bases about 30 60 millimeter models as the base unit, and the base of the 30 models roughly depict something like 500 to 1000 soldiers. So 4 of these bases of 100 models depict something like 2 to 4000 soldiers in real life. These are battles of basically thousands of models to be played and finished in the classic 2 to 3 hours, which is sort of common for war games. So basically the afternoon game across the whole scales. Army games already have complete ignore of mechanics from the skirmish games, but in turn, at their own system then wouldn't make sense in the small games such as retreat routes for brigades, camp protections, large formation maneuvers, and chain of command mechanics and stuff like that. And in the end, as honorable mention at the end of the video is the strategy games. All the previous games are still on a tactical level of warfare when it comes to basically the actual combat and fighting. Above all of that, they are strategy games where you move your division or armies around the map, and the battle themselves are already resolved more by the modifiers and few of the dice rolls, not the actual deployment of your forces. As the logic goes, these are purely basically token games that don't operate with miniatures, or they are there just as stand-ins for tokens. Common example of games like this would be Axis and Allies or Risk. Or for the more hardcore example, there is the legendary game of the campaign for the North Africa, the Desert War of 1940 to 43, about Erwin Rommel in Africa, made famous by the sketch The Big Bang Theory, and the game itself takes much longer to finish than the historical Africa Corps campaign. So I hope this video was sort of helpful if you are, newcomer to the hobby, and help you to orient yourself into what these skirmish regimentals and the terms they are people using online meaning. And if you do, don't forget to like, subscribe to see more of me, and comment your inputs. And if you are a newcomer and have some questions, well, feel free to ask them. I will be happy to answer to you. And if you are a newcomer, you will probably be hooked up for the new video, which will be about wargaming and its scales again, but not about the army size, but of the miniature size. So don't forget to subscribe to see it. That was Spotan's War, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys.